I'm very, very excited about this episode, and I've got a lot to say about this episode in preparation for this episode, even though I don't know if it's necessarily necessary to say all these things in preparation for the episode, and perhaps we just let the episode stand alone on its own. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not 100% sold on what the hell I'm talking about or what I'm about to say. But before we get to any of those things, energiesofpodcast.com, go subscribe wherever you listen to it. If you listen to us on iTunes, congratulations. I've decided I'm going to stop asking you to go leave a review on iTunes. I think that's kind of cheesy and dumb. So we're not going to ask that anymore. But wherever you listen, subscribe and download more episodes. Just download all day long. Just set up your computer to download continuous episodes of the Energies Love podcast, and then share and tell people about the podcast, because that's how the podcast expands and grows. Like if we all just kept good things to ourselves and we never told anybody else about the things that we like, then we would just be selfish and we would keep all good things to ourselves and nobody would ever know. So tell people about the podcast. This episode 131 of the podcast, is brought to you by InBody Yoga Academy. So InBody is located in Salt Lake City, Utah, at 1597 South, 1100 East. Go to their website, inbodyyogaacademy.com. You can also go to our website, click on the sponsors tab, and you will find a link taking you to their website. But InBody is a center for yoga mindfulness, yoga therapy classes, and teacher trainings. InBody has over 15 years of experience in training yoga teachers. The aim of the school is to guide the individual into a greater understanding of their own gifts, both in the yoga practice and in your everyday life. So whether you're brand new and you've never gone to a yoga class before or a yoga studio before, there's a big difference between practicing yoga at home by yourself, watching it on YouTube or something like that, and actually going to a yoga studio. And if you haven't experienced it, I would highly recommend it. And I would also highly recommend going to InBody Yoga Academy. Go show them some love, find them on Facebook, pop in and try them out. Okay, on to this episode. Episode 131 of this wonderful podcast that we've been doing for quite some time now. This is a very important episode. This is an episode that's going to kick off a slew of topics over the next probably long time. And in the space of what we talk about during this episode, this caveat is we get things wrong. We say things that are going to upset some people, trigger some people, offend some people. All of those things are probably going to happen depending on who's listening to this podcast or who's listening to this episode. But I encourage you to please hang in there and stick with it, because this is something that is massively important to me. And I want to be able to spark conversation and thought process in hopes of potentially changing some dynamics in the space of what we discussed during this episode. I haven't told you what it is yet, because honestly, it's kind of this huge, big topic. It's, I don't even know how to label it or even how to really talk about it. It is the current state of what it's like for women in this world and why it is that way, and what's going on in society and in culture, both with women and men, masculinity, femininity, toxic behaviors across the board, and what good men or people, good people, all of us, not just men, but what we can do to help change it. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. Just listen to the episode, hang in there and get through it and think about these things, because people in general, all of us across the board, including men really need to step up and change how they live, how they think, how they interact, how they raise children, how they treat women, how they move through life as men. We really need to do more. And this is the beginning of the more that I'm going to be doing to help in this arena and in this space. So Stephanie and I have a wonderful conversation and get super into this topic and into this space. And we both come at it from our own perspectives and our own life experience. And you guys, the listener, get to benefit and hopefully enjoy. And if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with us, please reach out. If you have any ideas, in the space of this arena and into this topic and into these discussions, please reach out and let us know your thoughts. But here we go. This is episode 131 with me and Steph. Steph and I chatting about super fun things, super difficult things, but here we go.
You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The podcast for the universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Did you get it before? Like, she looked at me for a minute and realized what I was doing and put my head back down and immediately went back to.
And then she realized,
she's
go
like,
fuck yourself.
Yeah, like, you don't want to pit me.
You haven't listened to the newest episode yet, have you?
No.
I joke in the promo for it in the intro.
Yeah.
That we're going to start a podcast for Angel.
A podcast for Angel?
Angel's podcast.
Angel's podcast. Oh.
It's going to be called The Nap Chronicles.
The Nap Chronicles.
It was super funny. I cracked myself up when I said it.
Yeah. You're cute.
And then I left it in. I feel like this is too high.
Yeah, we'll fix it.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
I'm not very slow this morning. I feel very, very amped up, anxious, very like.
Should we talk really fast? Do the podcast really fast? Sounds like they've got it on fast forward. They up the speed on it.
Have you? I don't listen to them like that. Do you sometimes?
It depends.
Yeah.
So I do play with this. There's some podcasts that I listen to that
You'll speed up.
The whole thing is such a slow conversation and it's still good, but sometimes it's too slow. So yes, I speed it up. I'm like, I've got a 30-minute drive, people. Let's make this happen.
I think it's cool that they do that in some of the apps. I don't think I've ever honestly listened to one like that.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. I like to just, listen to it as it was intended to be listened to.
And that probably says more to you and more to me than anything else. I'm more in a rush. I listen to podcasts like I drive with intent and purpose and getting there post haste.
And I just put along.
Sometimes maddeningly so.
Nice and slow.
We're in a hurry and you're like, no, go the speed limit. What is that?
I find myself going the speed limit more and more. I was thinking about this the other day when I was driving. And it was like, I think I drive slower now than I ever have before in my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I don't know why. Because I really like driving fast.
Do you?
Where were we the other day? What were we doing?
We were coming home and you were driving fast and scared me.
That's right.
That was a stressful situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I like when I need to drive fast, I like it. And then it's like, okay, I'm driving fast.
My stress level was heightened though. So at that point it was kind of, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there's a middle ground. It's either you're very slow putting along
I think we just go the speed limit.
Well, I try. My feet don't cooperate.
Which one of the kids was like a
suggestion. They may have got that from me. I say, well, sometimes it is a suggestion. No. Yes, when they're yellow, it's a suggestion.
You're right. A recommended speed limit.
Yeah,
at times.
But you do not have to go that speed, which means.
Okay, I can see the confusion.
Right?
Those are few and far in between.
Maybe I'm colorblind. Maybe all the white speed limit signs look yellow to me. And I'm like, that's a good suggestion. I choose to
try that next time you get pulled over.
Well, luckily I haven't.
Just say, I'm colorblind. I thought that the white sign was really yellow.
I didn't stop because your red and blues look like purple and greens. And I thought we were having a party. I was like, woo woo. I think it'll work.
That would be way funny.
Set some bail money aside for me.
That would be a new one. I never heard one that good before.
Yeah. See?
Yeah, sorry, officer, I'm colorblind and I couldn't tell that you had your lights on. Your red and blue lights. That's a good one.
I will keep that in the, hopefully nobody that's going to pull me over is going to hear that.
You'd have to stick with it though.
I'd stick with it and not giggle.
Like when you go to court and you'd be like, sorry, because obviously
wear mismatched clothes and
like
stuff.
You're still going to get the ticket. It doesn't fucking matter. You're still going to get the ticket. But then you get to go fight it in court and be like, sorry, Your Honor, I'm colorblind and I couldn't tell that he had his overhead red and blue lights on. I could see some lights flashing behind me, but because I'm colorblind, they just look clear.
They look clear. Everything looks clear. That was a weird laugh.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
They'd
I don't
have
know
to.
that I would. I would have to show.
No,
And I don't have insurance, so I can't go to the doctor to get a doctor's note to prove it to you.
they would
So-
have to give it to you.
They would?
Yeah, they would give it to you. The judge would dismiss the ticket.
Well, hell yeah.
Within reason.
Within reason.
Yeah, like you can't use that in regards to why you led them on a tri-county pursuit.
Well, luckily I don't normally, travel tri-county lengths, so we'll be okay. I'll just pull in the driveway and be like, "Oh, do you know my husband? Are you here to say hi? Do you have a podcast scheduled? Is that why you were here? I led you here. You're welcome. What's the matter? Why do you have that angry look on your face? Are you mad at me?
Why is your gun out?
I'm a nice person."
Oh my goodness.
Colorblind. Got it.
Colorblind. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm nervous about this episode. I don't want to talk about this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Super bad.
Let's do it.
I've been very, very anxious and waiting to discuss this topic. But I'm also very nervous to discuss this topic.
Well, I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited to talk about vagina monologues.
Okay, so you go
Men,
first.
women. Me go first.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
If you're excited, then you go first. That'll make it easier for me.
I don't want to sum up everything in like one breath, though.
Well, you don't have to sum up.
I know, but I might, because it might
It's-
just all come out. There. Now I have nothing else to say.
We'll give the listeners background as far as what the hell we're talking about and why.
Well, I don't have a lot of background. I've only been to one vagina monologue.
I know, but like that's what we're talking about, and that's why we're talking about it. So why are we talking? Like,
Why are we talking? I don't know. You wanted to talk about it. And that's why we're talking about it.
no. So a few weeks back,
I have a vagina, so I figure I can talk about vagina monologues.
yes,
My yoni is going to be leading this podcast.
you're a few weeks back. Our oldest daughter, who's in college, was she participated in the Vagina Monologues held at her college.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really, really cool. And we got to go and watch.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're here.
And now we're here.
And we're going to talk about it.
Okay. Should I just like give my perspective
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like, well, to sum it up, because we'll elaborate throughout the episode, I'm sure. I didn't know what to expect. And
I had never been to one either.
yeah, I mean, I had an idea, but I thought I had an idea until we went and watched it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't have an idea. I thought I did. It was, I guess, throughout the majority of it, I was in awe. I was happy. I was sad. I felt connected. I felt not alone. It was like my heart broke for the things that, like the experiences. And, to a point of how lucky we are here for the rights that we have. And that's a whole other thing. My heart broke for women around the world, and it celebrated the owning of oneself and just hearing other people think like you, and the fears that they have. And it just like, there was such a unity. And then I had parts that were, I think, yes, it's called the Vagina Monologues. However, I was having issues with, when they were talking about rape and abuse and just any kind of sexual assault or harassment. Yes, it is prominently women that receive that. However, it's not just all. Like, you can't just ignore the guys that have also been abused and have that. It's like, to say that, yes, women matter, and so much has been pushed aside, but you're also saying that it only matters if you're a woman too. And I know that that's not the intent, but it just seemed so, they had transgender up there, but again, it was only recognizing that if you identified as female. And I didn't agree with that. I thought it needed,
Go ahead.
I'm going to give my whole spill and then we'll go. And so I had that going through it, but it was just like, it was still like, well, there's room for improvement. There's room for improvement. Everybody can improve. It can be included on, just because you have a vagina or you identify as a female doesn't mean you're the only one that falls in that category. And it doesn't mean that you're the only one. Like, there's women that are also the assailants, or, it needs to be, I think it needs to be more encompassing of the truth of the matter, and not create, boy, feeling all this power. When it was over, I looked over at you and was like, oh, wait a minute. Like that, what does it feel like for you to be here? Because you're a good guy. You're not a perfect man. Not saying that, but you're a good guy. You're the one that they were saying, like, where are the men? Like, stand up. You're the one, you would not let that happen. You're one of the good ones. And so how unsafe did it feel for you at that moment when you have all these women that has been on this man bashing kick, to be a man there, to be supporting, and to not have any support in that? It kind of, again, it's my take, so like, pissing off the women around the world, but it felt too man bashy. And I don't think that, it felt like it was creating, yes, awareness, and it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be brought out, and we need to all band together, but it can't be done with hate. And it felt like it was really done with man bashing hate, and every man is, I didn't like that. And then I felt like, oh my God, do I need to suit up and protect my husband that's walking out, and he's this amazing man? And like, I went from thinking I wanted to take Asher so we could hear, like
Our 12-year-old son.
Oh, I didn't remember, had an idea, but now I'm glad we didn't. But I wanted him to hear that perspective. I didn't want it to be a closet thing that they lock away and that you don't hear about. I wanted him to see women's perspective, and it's okay to talk about bodies, and it's so, this is how they feel. And I am so glad we did. Not only was it more intense, but I think he would have walked out of there feeling like he was garbage and a predator, and he's not. He's 12. Like, I don't think he would have felt good about himself for being a man, and that would have been the message that he would have got, that he's a bad person. And I don't think that's okay. So, wonderful thing, but there's definitely room for improvement with that situation. That's what I think.
So, I realized...
Podcast out.
Podcast is over. I realized as you were talking that we probably need to give a little bit more background than we went to the Vagina Monologues at the college that our daughter goes to, because some people may not even know what the hell the Vagina Monologues are. So the Vagina Monologues were started, I believe, like 20 plus years ago.
Like 25, something like that.
And I have no idea why they were started, meaning like the original purpose or drive behind it. My guess is it's probably the same reason why they're still going on today, just as a way to empower women and normalize some of the things that aren't talked about in regards to what women deal with and face. And so they've been around for 20 plus years, and it's a performance, essentially what it is, or what this experience was, because my guess is the vagina monologues across the country vary in the way that they kind of look and feel to some degree. But this is 30 plus women up on stage, all taking turns, getting up, sometimes in pairs, or multiple women at the same time speaking, sometimes individuals speaking, and they're all telling stories, or sometimes they're like poems or pieces that are all centered and related around not just their vaginas, but things like you were talking about, like trauma and abuse, and ways that they struggle or have struggled, or the ways that they have been persecuted throughout their life. And it's not just individual to that person that's speaking, because the vagina monologues themselves are like this thing. So you put on your, like the performance in Salt Lake City, Utah is still connected to the big, I'm doing a terrible job because honestly, I don't fucking know. I'm just I'm assuming that I know. But anyways, it's like you pull information. So if you're going to perform the vagina monologues, then you use monologues that are provided from headquarters, for lack of a better term. And some of the stories are personal to the woman that is giving it as well. And
they have originals.
Yes,
well.
yeah, original pieces. That's what they were called. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So that gives you an idea, if you have no idea, of what the vagina monologues are, and you can Google it and get a far better idea. And I'm sure you can probably go to YouTube and watch some.
Yeah.
My guess is that there's a lot of information out there, and I would highly encourage anybody to go.
Yes.
Man or woman, probably not 12-year-old boys.
No.
I think it was probably more appropriate for, maybe if the boy was 16, 17, maybe 17, 18 years old. I think he's probably, because they are intense.
They are intense.
And, oh my God, baby, it fucked me up so bad.
Tell me.
Well, I don't feel like you, I want to know more about how you felt during it. But the other caveat that I want to throw out there too, to the people that are listening, is both of us aren't going to get this right in the way that we talk about this. We're probably going to offend somebody that's listening, probably going to trigger some people that are listening. This isn't like, we're not going to get this 100% right. And I think that is another thing in the space of culture today, in society today, in regards to all sorts of different things, not just women being empowered and like the Me Too movement, and everybody being accepted for how they want to identify, all of those type of things that are really going on and taking place in today's world. That's very, very prevalent in society right now. I think a lot of times people aren't getting it right, and it's not for lack of trying, and it's not for lack of compassion or caring or a desire to want to get it right. It's simply for a lack of knowledge. Sometimes it's simply for a lack of understanding, but not for a lack of compassion. And that's for me.
Yeah.
Like, I have immense compassion and love, but at the same time, I don't have a total understanding of things, as well as a lot of it. I'm going to go way off on tangents as we continue to talk about this. Anyways.
I love how you describe that. That's perfect that's
No.
how I explained it perfectly. This is the knowledge that we have. This is where we're at. This is what we're feeling, but it's not for lack of compassion. It's just, this is from what I understand it to be, in a sense. I love that.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk as openly as I can, trying to separate from that dynamic of worrying about offending or upsetting somebody that may be listening, or saying something that may be offensive. And hopefully, if you are listening and you just take that into consideration, that I'm a good man, I'm a good husband, I'm a good father, I'm loving and I'm caring and I'm compassionate. But at the same time, I'm not perfect with my words very often. We've talked about this in the past, where sometimes I say things that are simply to present the other side of the argument. Mm-hmm. Like in previous episodes where I talked about Jesus being a bastard and upsetting somebody that was listening, not to the podcast, but that story. Anyways, I'm going to give you, because you and I haven't talked about this a lot.
No, you wanted to save it for this.
I did want to save it for the podcast. And part of the reason why I wanted to save it for the podcast is that very end of the Vagina Monologues, where they're like, what are you doing? All the good men out there, what are you doing?
Yeah, where are you?
Yeah, where are you? And I'll get to that. Anyways, I'm going to paint a picture. So imagine you're going to go see your oldest daughter perform and participate in the Vagina Monologues at the college that she goes to, which is a very liberal college in Salt Lake City. And you go there with your wife, and you go there with your other two daughters, and you sit down in an auditorium, or I sit down in an auditorium where obviously the vast majority of people in the audience are women. And it's young, it's old, it's the entire spectrum of women, as well as straight women, lesbians, transgendered, whatever. The not Gambit, that's a great character from X-Men. Whatever the gamut of people that could exist. I think we had a small little microcosm of that in the audience, with the exception of men. There weren't a ton of men there. There were men there, but there wasn't a lot. Obviously, we were outnumbered. And you sit down excited to watch this because you're proud of your daughter. And some of the things that came to mind right off the bat was there's no way in hell that we could ever have a penis monologue. The penis monologues, where men get up on stage and perform the same thing in the same fashion. And that was my first thought, was like, ha ha ha, how funny would it be if men got up and did the equivalent from the opposite side, from the male perspective. And I laughed in my head as I was thinking about that, because first off, I think that they would, especially in the current climate that exists in our culture today, it would be seen as such a, like an attack and an affront and like a discrediting of women and what they're trying to do in today's world. And there's a lot of stuff right now that I follow kind of half-assedly because I don't really like it. It pisses me off. But men that are trying to own the space of being a man in this space where it doesn't feel safe to be a man today, or masculinity is being attacked, and they're trying to like say, hey, like there's nothing wrong with being a man. There's nothing wrong, you know, all this kind of different shit that I haven't seen anybody quite get it all the way right yet, but that's my perspective, right? Anyways, I laughed in my head of thinking how funny it would be if there was the penis monologues, and then envisioning what that would look like. And as the night progressed, and since then, I've thought of that same thing. And I thought, there's no way in hell we would ever get 30 men to get up on stage and talk openly about the struggles that they have experienced in regards to their sexuality, in regards to their penis, in regards to that whole thing that those women did. And it's not, because I think that a lot of times, like for example, the beginning of the monologues or the beginning of the performance, they all took turns, or a group of women were up there like owning all these different words to describe their vaginas, slang terms, and just the huge gambit of, I'm going to keep saying gambit instead of gamut. I don't even know which the correct pronunciation of that word is. But they used all of these terms to kind of own their vagina in a sense, I suppose. Or, and I thought about what that would look like for men to get up and do that same thing, because obviously the penis has just as many different terms, right? In references to the man's genitalia. And thinking back now, and since then I've thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't ever have, like, it would take some pretty powerful men to get up and share stories the way that women did. Do you know what I mean? For a man to get up and share a story about being raped would be really, really difficult for that man, I would imagine. For a man to get up and share, because one of the big themes in the performance, and keep in mind, this is my fucking take and my perspective, was the way that women aren't comfortable with their vaginas, both the way that they look, They feel like it has been, do you know what I mean? Like it's like the one story about the old lady who never really talked about her vagina and grew up, not really, like, you just don't talk about it. It's just there, but we're not really going to talk about it. Not really knowing what it is, what it does, all these kind of different things, just not really being familiar with their actual vagina itself, and then having a bunch of shame about the way that it looks and what it does, and then obviously like your period and what that does and all the shame associated with that and all those kind of different things. And I don't think people really, and maybe they do, but I don't think women really understand that men have just as much shame and confusion and pain and trauma and doubt and all sorts of stuff in regards to their penis. And I don't think that, it wasn't a vagina penis monologue. Like you talked about how you felt like it was kind of unbalanced in a sense. And I think that's okay, because the purpose of it, at least my take of it, the purpose wasn't to bring balance to the space. I think balance needs to be brought to the space in the big grand scheme if we're really going to move forward and if we're going to heal some of this stuff in the big cultural societal sense. But as far as that night's concerned, I wasn't necessarily upset or frustrated that there wasn't bounced, because there is a lot of pain that women have suffered. And I think that pain has to come out and that pain needs to be processed. But there's a lot of pain that men have suffered. And like I can speak to my own experience when it comes to like the level of confusion that ensues around your penis is pretty massive. And just as women have a perception in society, because like you and Janelle talked about this on your guys' fun Tequila Colada drunk podcast, you guys have this perception about your vaginas and what they're supposed to look like. And if they don't look like what they're supposed to look like, then somehow they're ugly and they're not going to be accepted and all these kind of different things. And that was a theme and an undercurrent as well in some of the stories that were told the night of the Vagina Monologues. Men have the same thing in regards to their penis. If your penis isn't big, right, then somehow it's not accepted and it's not going to be valued, and you aren't going to be valued as a man, as a lover, as a partner. Your self-worth isn't going to be what it needs to be or should be simply because you think that you have a small penis. And that standard is set in society as well. And, like, that's stupid. That's just as dumb as the standard that's set around women's vaginas. Everybody's body is different and everybody's body is unique to them. And obviously everybody's body is perfectly fine as is and should be accepted as such. And so that was a dynamic, I thought, initially, how, the men that got up on stage and tried to do the penis monologues would be ran out of the village and stones would be thrown and they would be cast out and, demonized as women-hating, masculine pieces of shit that can't just let women have the vagina monologues. They have to come in with their big dicks and wave them around and try to control. And then I'm like, no, like, you really wouldn't be able to find 30 men to get up on stage and talk openly and express openly about all the pain and shame surrounding that. So I thought, how cool would that be to have the equivalent, to have 30 men. And then I started thinking about, like, do I know 30 men that could do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm getting there. I think I could probably get 15 men that I know to do it. And so I've been thinking maybe that's something that I need to do. And then as the night progressed, I'm sitting there next to you and Stevie and Maddie's in the audience and watching going up on stage. And like you can palpably feel the energy in the room of all the pain and all the trauma. And it sucked to sit in because there's so much. And there's so much pain that women have had to deal with and experience. And the women that I love in my life, and the women that I care about greatly, like above all else, have experienced pain and suffering. And at the end of the night, when they went on their big tangent of things that they were like fed up with, it was this quick, random, like, you know, I'm done with this, I'm done with that. I'm basically 5 or 6 women up on stage just throwing out all the different things that they're fed up with and that they're done with that's taking place in the world still today. And one of the things that they did mention was like, where are all the good men? Where are the men that haven't, that aren't doing anything, right? That aren't doing anything in regards to changing some of these things. And so that really stuck with me, and that really fucked me up in the sense of like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything to change the society and the viewpoint of things. I'm not doing anything to help the situation and make the world a better place in regards to these topics and this stuff, so that it's a better world for my daughters and for my wife to live in, and one day my granddaughters potentially. So then I'm like, well, shit. What the fuck am I supposed to do? Because I feel like that's where men are at. And that's where I'm at. But I think that the good men that are out there, what are we supposed to do? What is the right thing to do? Because first off, it brings up a lot, like, I'm obviously going to ramble a lot. Some of the culture that exists, one of the things that they threw out was like locker room talk. Like, I think I heard that term at some point during the Vagina Monologues, because that's one of the things that they're like fed up with, right? There's a culture that exists in the world where women are talked about by men as purely sexual objects, and they aren't talked about in any other form or fashion. And I'm guilty of that. And I think about why I do that. I don't do it as much as, because I thought back over the course of my life, will you try to look at me while I'm talking? So then I feel like I'm okay to be saying the things that I'm saying.
You're okay to be seen.
I'm sure you're feeling a bunch of stuff, and feel free to jump in at any point, please, because I feel like I'm just fucking rambling.
No, by all means, continue.
Because there's so many things that like good men are guilty of doing, right? That are so shitty, but yet how can you, like, what's the path to forgiveness for things that, if we look at, I think on the scale of 1 to 10, you know, the small little things can be forgiven, but then there seems to be some big things that can't be forgiven. And there's a like deep part of me that believes that there's forgiveness for all things. And that's me personally. I understand that not everybody feels that way, but I think that all things are forgivable, because I believe that all great things that cause massive pain and trauma by individuals, I think, stem from broken parts of them inside and emotional, mental issues that probably stemmed from a very early age in that individual's life. So we are persecuting and punishing people that are broken and not forgiving them for their actions. But that's a slippery slope, and that's a different conversation. But I thought about some of the ways that I had done things over the course of my life that were shitty towards women. And I thought about back when I was like in high school, there were girls that I went to high school with that I used to just like go up and grab their asses, or I would go up and slap their ass, which is very clearly now in today's society and in today's world, massively unacceptable. And I agree wholeheartedly that it is unacceptable. But then I look at, myself 20 plus years ago and think, why did I do that? And why was that accepted? And
it wasn't accepted. I know, let you talk, and I've been letting you talk, but that I have to stop that. That wasn't accepted. It's just we didn't have a voice.
Okay.
We weren't allowed to tolerate it. We had to that's fine. So it wasn't accepted. You guys took that.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, go ahead.
But what I'm saying is, what about that kid, me, that felt like that was okay, or not even necessarily felt like that was okay, but still did that? Because it leads to a bigger conversation, I think, in regards to sex and in regards to the way that it is dealt with and explained in culture as a whole, in the way that it's viewed and the way that it's kind of not talked about and not dealt with. And there's a lot of shame associated with it and all sorts of different things, right? Because if you take a 14 or 15-year-old, either or, girl or boy, they're going to have a massive amount of hormones raging through their body. We all know that. That's not something, I know that this is triggering you, right?
Well, I just at what point, do I just... Yes, it is, because I kind of feel like you're jump in, but is there any room for me to jump in here?
Absolutely. Because you have the flip side of the coin.
I do have the flip side of the coin.
Where it's not acceptable and you didn't have a voice, and women just didn't know what to do in those circumstances.
Luckily, we have men to speak for us.
Doing the best that I can.
As far as 14-year-old boy goes, or girl, I think that is, in the grabbing the ass, and when you're looking at why did I do that, I think that is where compassion can come in. Not for the adults in the sense, but for that is when you know better, you do better. What difference did you know at that point? When you were doing that, did you know that that was wrong? Did you know that what you were doing was hurtful? Maybe. And there are times, I'm sorry, to piss people off here, but there are times that this is going to start a flood. Yes, I don't want some random guy coming up and smacking my ass or our daughter's asses and somebody to think they can because they like the way it looks. But there are times that, oh my God, women want their asses slapped. Now, is that for you to decide, some random guy to come up? If you don't know that, no, she doesn't want you to slap her ass. But that's a whole other aspect of what's that convoluted, because women aren't really allowed to be sexual either. But I like when you smack my ass. And going back in times, there may have been somebody that I was interested in that you come up and smack my ass. That wasn't something that I didn't like. However, there were plenty of coming up and smacking your ass that, don't fucking touch me. Don't touch me. But you can't say anything. You just have to kind of smile and shrink away and kind of oh, that's what it is. And you're not allowed to go. But it makes you like, it makes you feel like you're like vomiting inside everywhere. Everything hurts, but you can't even let it out. So there's dynamics there. So that goes back around. What did you think? Did you think you were doing something wrong? Did you think you were doing something hurtful? Not now. You have to go back then.
I know. And that's the problem, is I'm going to be guessing as far as what I was thinking at the time. Because honestly, I don't remember exactly what I was thinking. I can kind of remember some, so fucking hate this. Like, it's uncomfortable and it's shitty.
Yeah, I have a lot to say.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you have a lot to say. And we can definitely
get into that at some point.
So we can say everything because I love you.
Thank you for the permission.
See, these are the bigger topics of fuck off. I don't give you permission to say anything, right? And stop thinking that somehow there's that dynamic. Like, men, I think good men aren't sitting around thinking that women are weak, right?
Are we moving on? Are we taking a tangent? Because I'm going to go double back too. If you're going to go here, like, stay where you are.
So I think that as a teenage boy slapping girls' asses, obviously there's part of it that is just like, oh, that ass looks good, right? I like that ass. But obviously there were a lot of asses. This sounds terrible.
I about lost my drink.
Obviously, there were a lot of asses that I thought looked good, but I didn't go up and slap everybody's ass that I thought looked good. It was only a couple of there was only a few girls that I actually did that to.
Tell me about those girls.
Well, I think the space is, part of it is not knowing how to express sexuality, not knowing how to express when you are turned on because it's not accepted and it's not acceptable. Also not having the skill set to express it in a healthy way. And then, because I think part of me thought that it was flirting, right? Part of me thought that it was how to flirt or how to be flirtatious with those girls. And at times it really seemed like it was reciprocated and accepted as flirtation. So then it's like, okay, that's an okay thing that I'm doing, because it seemed like it was reciprocated in the sense, or accepted flirtation.
So the girls' asses that you smacked, out of all of the asses that looked smackable, the girls' asses that you smacked were ones that you felt it was reciprocated for. It was acceptable, not the ones that you thought would just tolerate it. Like you could get away with it.
I think it's a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Right. Some of it is like girls, and this makes me like, this is the part that I think this is why good men don't speak, because we're afraid of speaking up and then being held accountable for things and mistakes that we have made in the past.
But you did make mistakes in the past.
Yeah. Like I did make mistakes in the past. And
so is everybody.
I know. That's what I'm saying, is we aren't allowing for the fact that people are just monkeys trying to figure out how to fucking do things.
Well, there's also a difference between I smacked an ass in high school and I raped women or men or however. Like that's a big thing. Like for the ones that are like, oh, I did this when I was a kid. Fuck you. There's no part of you that thought that was acceptable. You know that shit was wrong. So I don't want to hear your sob story about how you didn't know any better. And you should be going through like, no, you need to be held accountable for that. If you're going around raping people, no. This smacking girls' asses and maybe coming from a different topic or a different point of view I'm not saying that that's okay either. I'm
not saying it's okay either.
Like,
and I'm not even saying that it's okay in the context of like the time and the space, because over the course of history, things that were acceptable during the time, we look back and realize that they weren't acceptable.
exactly.
And
know better, do better.
but that doesn't make them acceptable, even though they took place during a time period where it was acceptable. And I think that's one of the issues that has to be overcome, is that there has to be a path of redemption. There has to be a space where it's acceptable, even because you
Wait, what?
Well, you just used you didn't compare, meaning on the same level, but you just used slapping ass and raping and how they're very clear to you, right? Where one is forgivable and one is not forgivable. But there is going to be people that put those two in the same category, and for them, neither one is forgivable.
Okay, well, there's also this. Did anybody ever tell you to stop?
Yes.
Okay, what did you do?
Stopped.
See, that there's a difference. There's a difference there. And it's not, there's women, I'm not saying that if you didn't say stop, if you were afraid to use your voice, however, you were communicated with you that that was not wanted and you stopped.
Exactly.
That's the separation. I don't want this. Now, what needs to be shifted is where it's not safe to use your voice. It's not safe to say, I don't want this. The repercussions that come from that. Like, what happens when you say no? What happens when you don't want something? When you reject the guy? What fallout do you have? When you have fallout for rejection, so you can't use your voice and say no, that is just as bad. There should be no fallout for saying no to anything. That's the separation. So I'm not lumping it as it's black or white on that. It's was a voice used? Were you safe to use your voice? That's where it's forgivable and unforgivable.
Now my head hurts. Because this whole topic, this whole space, like this whole arena is so vast, and there's so much interconnected and convoluted in this space, because it's not one thing, and every single person is going to come to this arena with their own experiences, with their own thoughts, with their own emotions, with their own belief systems, right? So that's the problem that I think society is having, where we're trying to isn't the right word, but the problem is everybody's coming to this arena. It's like we're all going to the same stadium to come and sit down, but everybody has their own experiences, and we're trying to like go through some of these issues and not allowing for the fact that, I mean, it's so fucked and it's so hard. It's so fucking hard. Because think about it from this perspective, dear. It's not on this. I mean, we're going to use this as kind of just as an analogy to kind of look at it, right? Racism. It's very, very different than the topic that we're kind of talking about. But there are people who are raised and brought up in a household where racism isn't thought of as racism. It's simply the way that it is, where whether it's whatever it is, whether it's Black people or Hispanics or Asians or Native Americans or whatever it is, they're not looked at. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, there's children that are brought up in households where terms are used in reference to other cultures, where that child never realizes that it's racist or that there's racism that exists. They just use that term to reference those cultures, because it's like if we were to teach our children that a rake was a shovel, and they grew up their whole life, yeah, that's a shovel, when really it's a rake. They're not stupid or ignorant or, wrong necessarily. That was always the norm for them. So it's not to say that racism is accepted because that's just the way people are raised. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we have to allow for the fact that just because somebody may be racist doesn't necessarily mean that they're racist. That just means that that's the way that they were brought up and raised. And then when they go out into the world and they get a better understanding of cultural norms and suddenly realize why that term is offensive or why somebody, you know, like getting exhausted. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Do they, when they know better, do better? That's
Hopefully.
not, it's like, oh, that's how you were raised. That's okay. You can keep going. No, like
So-
you get out of that fucked up little bubble that you were raised in. You get out of that, or what your understanding is, there's information. There's everywhere you go, everywhere you look. Yes, there you have the hate on all aspects, but there is the opportunity to choose something different everywhere, whether you're talking racism or sexism or whatever. There is all the opportunities. You can choose a different way. You can choose a different path. You can choose how you lead and how you treat people, regardless what they look like or what parts they have. That's a choice. There's a point where it is no longer how you were raised. It's a choice that you make.
So when you know better, you do better.
You know better, you do better.
Okay. I totally agree. And I think that that should be, I think that should be the underlying current surrounding everything, where once you know better, then you do better. But the problem, I mean, I think that's a good like baseline that every like reasonable person could subscribe to and say, absolutely. Right. Because like we said in the beginning, kind of where we're not going to get this perfect because it's like, I don't necessarily know better across the board with things, even though I have a good understanding and I'm always coming at it from a compassionate point of view. I'm still going to kind of mess up, but that's where I'm saying, like, we have to allow for people to get to the point where they know better rather than just being like, you fucking idiot. You can't, you know, like, no, you can't slap girls' asses. I know completely that you can't slap girls' asses.
You don't walk around doing that now.
And I don't walk around doing that now. But it's okay to some degree that I did that when I was younger because I didn't know better. Like, am I supposed to be held accountable for actions that are 20 plus years ago? And
It depends on the action. No, I don't think you need to be held accountable for slapping girls' asses 20 years ago. I think it's important that you have learned and that you do things differently now. And that now, if they told you to stop and you didn't, there's things with that. It depends on the action. It is so dependent on the action. So all I can think of is, this is probably going to make your skin crawl. I am sitting across from you and I love you. And I think it is acceptable that you know better and you did better. That when they said stop, you stopped. Now, if I was sitting across from you and you were telling me about how you were raised to where it was okay to take a woman as you saw fit and they said no and it didn't matter, but now you know better and don't do that, good. But I'm not going to be sitting across from you. I am not that big of a person. You could say, I don't believe, no, fuck that. Hell no. I would not. I would very much want you held accountable. Like, would you have to pay for those? Would you have to? Because now you know better and you do better. What's that woman think? It's like, oh, he knows better. So now my world isn't fucked. My insides don't bleed. I don't feel like this bullshit. That's something that she has to continue. Or he. It happens to boys too. He or she or whatever the identifier is. No disrespect. I just throw them all out there. That is something that is inside them forever. They don't get past it. It doesn't have to control their life. They don't live with that cloud over them. But that is something that doesn't go away. It does not go away. It's not where they have, okay, they've done their time, they've paid their sins, and it's no longer there. So they don't have to think about it. It doesn't haunt them anymore. Bullshit. There are things that are going to come up. There's different levels of healthy and healing parts, but that is a part of them that is always there. So to look at somebody else and say, oh no, you don't need to be held accountable because it was so long ago. I know that when I'm very strongly opinionated about something,
You can't touch that.
I know, I'm sorry. When I'm very strongly opinionated about something, it usually means I do need to open up my perspective and look at it another way.
Get a little tunnel vision, right?
Yeah. And I am realizing that I'm tunnel vision on this. However, I don't fucking care.
Okay.
It's what it is.
So this is what I want to talk about. Well, this is a thing that I'm talking about because they pose that fucking question. What are you good men doing? And I think this is why good men don't do things, because it's so hard and it's so scary. I've thought about what I can do.
What can you do?
Well, first off, we can talk about it on a fucking podcast. I thought that was a good first step,
You
right?
can quit putting their goddamn heads in the clouds
Okay.
or in the sand or whatever.
Slow down.
I'm a little fired.
I
Don't
understand.
tell me to slow down.
Well, I think this is how we control tunnel vision. Slow down, take some deep breaths, and just try to relax.
Am I not allowed to be emotional about this?
Holy fuck.
Like, yeah, you got some Danger Will Robinson men around the world right now listening to you like, dude.
I know.
She'll take a breath when she's ready. Don't tell her to take a breath.
Okay. But I think this is a good example of why good men don't do something, because it seems so dangerous to do something.
I'm not hearing you say do something, though. I'm hearing you say give slack to the guys that did it 20 years ago. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Okay. And that is 100% not what I'm saying in the slightest. Okay.
I know you, so I know that, but it doesn't sound like that. So
that's where we
to that.
have to not be tunnel visioned and not like there's a thing. Obviously, you know me, and if somebody's listening, the people that listen to this podcast, I'm sure are well aware of the fact that like I'm all about your emotions and feeling your emotions, and you have to feel some emotions.
Yes.
This right now in this conversation that you and I are having, we have to slow down our emotions a little bit and be able to connect intellectually into the topic and into the discussion and go into our brain a little bit more, because those two things are so separate. Mm-hmm. We can intellectually look at a topic and see it for what it is, but it doesn't change how we feel about a topic. We have to intellectually address some of this stuff a little bit more rather than feel it a little bit more, at least in this moment, simply so that we can move the conversation forward. And I'm not talking about you and I in the space of this podcast. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I think that's part of the issue is there's so much emotion wrapped around it that both sides get so tunnel visioned. Because I think about when I feel attacked, mm-hmm. I get reactive and defensive, right? Mm-hmm. So if men in general are suddenly feeling attacked, what are they going to do? They're going to get reactive. So what happens, baby? You have to be able to have this fucking conversation.
But it is, I can't, okay, don't tell me for one. Mm-hmm. And what's really, really frustrating is that men have had their voice this entire fucking time. They've had their voice and they chose how to use it. And you can say, well, men didn't take the power. Okay, women would get killed for speaking up. So yeah, they did take the power. And there is that dynamic. So women are using their voice now. And I'm over here saying that with the Vagina Monologues and how it should have been more balanced. Men get hurt too. Women hurt too. It needs to go to not be a man bashing thing. So I can find that middle ground. But to come up and say, oh, I'm sorry, are you not happy the way that we've heard you use your voice the entire time? So now you feel like, oh, what? You've had all of that. I still want you to have a voice, but don't come up slamming your shit around and acting like we're persecuting you.
Okay.
There is that. I understand that. But I'm sorry. I don't want to hear you playing the victim.
I'm not playing the victim. But if you're going to ask me, what are you going to do about it? And I'm not saying you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
I'm not saying you. I'm talking about this. That's what stuck with me, dear. I'm sitting in that fucking auditorium surrounded by the women that I love the most in my life, who I will do absolutely anything for. And then society says, well, you're not doing shit about this big fucking thing that all four of them have to fucking deal with and experience in their life. Okay. So, Mr. Good fucking man who would do anything for your fucking wife and your daughters, what are you doing about this? Nothing.
I spoke to that too.
Okay.
And how it wasn't fair for you to feel like that. And I didn't even know you felt like that. I thought you felt like that because of how it felt.
What I'm trying to do now is talk on that. I'm trying to talk through what can we do. Okay. So I can sit in that space, or I can intellectually, I do need to sit in that space more, and I need to feel that more. And I have been. But then I have to look at it and I have to figure out what can I do. And then also in some way, shape or form, understand why good men aren't doing anything.
But they are. Because
that's then going to help me come up with an idea of what I can do to help good men do something. Because there's plenty of fucking good men out there. We far outweigh and outnumber the men that aren't good men.
Agreed.
100%. There are more good men than bad men. So let's stop focusing on the bad men and let's start focusing on the good men and what they can do.
It makes it hard when there's so many of those men that are not that are in power and that are calling the shots. And that is what throws so much to where you can see that.
But this is another thing, right?
I know, it's a whole other conversation.
The fact is, Stephanie, you see me as a good man, and I see myself as a good man, and our daughters see me as a good man. There's women out there who know me, who know Craig Salazar, who do not see me as a good man, who see me as part of the problem, who see me as a piece of shit. So that comes back to the thing of like, we all come to the arena with our own perspectives, our own experiences, our own beliefs, our own thoughts. We have to be able to talk through and disagree and somehow come to a place where we can move the conversation forward for the betterment of everyone. Because my guess is if we were to go and track down the girls whose asses I slapped in high school, they're probably going to have some negative ramifications of that at this point in their life in some way, shape, or form. And that sucks.
What would you say?
I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say besides I'm sorry.
So I come to you and I say, you knew me from high school. I'm like, remember, like, this hurt me. I didn't feel like I could say no. I felt like I didn't have a voice. And I feel like that you taking that action and that me being just a piece of meat for you to enjoy and to play with, that taught me that that's how I was, that was my role for men. This is how it felt for me. So this is how I view you. What do you say to me?
I'm sorry.
I just opened up my heart to you and said that. So just role play with me for a minute. I've got a point. This just happened. I just said that to you.
Yes.
And I'm standing like here, my little girl next to me. And I'm showing her how to stand up and say something to a man. And I just said that to you.
Yeah. I am terribly sorry. I wish I hadn't have done that. I wish that I had not done that to you. And I wish that there was a way that I could take back that so that it didn't have the effect on you that it did. And I don't know what else to say besides I'm sorry. I was wrong to do that.
Do you hear that? That's the accountability. That's what I'm talking about. That's the difference. That's the difference right there. You just held yourself accountable and let your heart come out and you knew better and you did better. That is the difference. That is what separates. That's why I know I'm sitting across from a good man. That is the difference. That's what good men are doing. Right there.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm suddenly very uncomfortable.
I love you. And baby, I'm trying to come up with a way to do something. Okay? I know that I'm a good man. We have to come up with a way to do something to help this in the big grand scheme of things, so that you, and so that our daughters and our granddaughters and our son and our grandsons and men and women across the board can move through this stuff easier.
That's what I thought I was doing.
You did.
It wasn't really that much about you.
No, you did. Okay? You did. Absolutely. But this isn't about me.
Like I said.
Okay, let's take a deep breath. Shake it out with me. Please. Please.
I'm so sad right now.
Why?
Like, I'm so sad because it feels like no matter what I say, every time you turn, it's like my feelings get invalidated every time. I see it from the men's perspective. I give love and like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. I see it from the woman's perspective and I'm frustrated. Oh, I shouldn't be doing that. I'm sitting over here doing the best I can do and have been on that spectrum on so many different charts that when I'm talking about, when I say that that's a difference, it's because I have had my insides shredded. So I can say, that's the fucking difference. Don't invalidate what I'm saying and tell me to shake it off and think differently and what more. Let me fucking do this how I want to do this. I'm saying that's the difference. I'm saying if I see your heart, I get to say that. Don't tell me to do it differently. Now I know I'm getting emotional. God for fucking bid. It needs to be more open. If it has created more hate and hate for men, the only thing that it is going to do is cause more pain and more hate. You cannot fight it with hate. You cannot fight it with cruelty. It has to come from love. And love also has to come from, I do believe, accountability. And to look into yourself and say, if you're standing there saying, well, that's not who I am now. I did that then, but whatever. It is what it is. Moving on. I don't have to be accountable. Then I'm not talking to you. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. And if you have your eyes open, we're like, I did not realize that was, now we're using a hand, smacking ass because like, those are your sins. Whatever. You don't have to talk to what it was like to assault somebody because you didn't do that. So I'm not focused on the ass slap, that's what we can relate to. I can relate to far deeper trauma than that. I'm saying it needs to not be hate. And I can go to where you talk about the penis monologues. And my first thing is like, that's all life has been. Like, turn on the TV, it's the penis monologues. That's how the voice was chosen to be used. And then you switched and said, talking about how they feel about their penis, the fears with their sexuality and how they feel in those emotions. Like, that's the voice. That I would support that show. How talking about the emotions, the heart. If you don't like, when you step back and you look at it, it's the same thing. Like, it's the same. It's the same. We're the same. One doesn't have to overpower the other. And because one starts to get a voice and the other feels threatened, yeah, look out. Women are finding out they have a voice. This shit is going to keep spreading. It's only scary if you don't want them to have a voice. It's only scary if you want to keep them in their place. If you want women to stand next to you and be your equal and have a say in what happens in their lives and their bodies, it is not scary to you. There is that shift. There is. It's going to be unbalanced for a while, but you can help it build instead of resisting everything. Don't tell me I'm thinking wrong. Or any woman. Or any man. They get to think the way that they think too. But God damn it. Regardless, my voice matters. And I want to share it how I feel.
Huzzah.
Huzzah.
Huzzah! I agree, Steph.
My chest is hurting a little bit.
Yeah, we're
Belly's
like
on
physically
fire.
uncomfortable in this
Yeah.
moment, right?
Yeah.
Like husband and wife sitting in their comfortable home
In a safe space.
in a safe, 100% safe space.
I can say all this to you.
Yeah, and we're both sitting here very, very physically uncomfortable and emotionally stressed.
I don't have ramifications for this.
Yeah,
I can say all of these things to you.
yeah.
It doesn't. I
And you
don't
know that
get
I'm not
punished for
gonna.
it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna turn around and be an asshole about any
Yeah.
of this shit.
And I'm still scared.
Yeah,
And my stomach hurts.
and I'm still scared to talk to you about this stuff. And I know that you're not going to. You might snap at me a little bit, but you're not going to punish me.
I'm not.
This is the big problem that I see.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. This is why good men aren't doing anything. And it's not to say that they're not. That's the other thing is, obviously there's plenty of men that are doing things. And there's plenty of women that are doing things. But this is why it's hard. Because for me to even try to sit in my living room and talk to my wife, right? How in the fuck are we supposed to like stand up and say shit in the big grand scheme of things, right? So women haven't had a voice. And when they finally get a voice, they stand up and fucking scream. And I understand that 100%.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful, Stephanie. But if we want to move forward, we all need to stop screaming and we need to have a conversation.
What happens after the scream?
I'm not minimizing this. I'm not minimizing the voice. I'm not saying you need to stop screaming. I'm not saying that at all. This is me like not playing devil's advocate, but it's like we have to be able to have all of these things and then get to a point where we can have a conversation about this and where we can move forward with it because it's not black and white. It's not simple, right?
This is a conversation.
I know.
It's just not one that you're leading. It's not one that, like, so does it feel like it's not a conversation because it's not going the exact way that you want it to?
And I'm not even talking about you and I in this moment. I'm talking about this. This is what like keeps me up at night, Steph, is what the fuck am I doing? I want to do something.
Well, then,
So I need to figure out what that is so that I can do it.
well, for the guys listening, at this moment, being able to have this conversation is doing something. For knowing better and doing better is something. To raise sons that respect their own bodies as well as women's bodies, and to understand that they are able to think instead of being taught that they're mindless Neanderthals, that if they see a woman's skin, that they're not responsible for their actions and they can do whatever and say whatever, to teach that is not the case. You are a strong man. You are aware of your body. You're in control of your body and you have thoughts and you get to think all of these things and you are incredible and powerful and you can stand on your own. And then to teach your daughters the same thing, that is doing something. You're talking about, oh, you're raised in a house like this, so what is they're supposed to do? Change the houses that our kids are raised in. That is doing something. and to not teach your kids to look the other way. If you saw a woman being pulled into an alley, if you saw guys surrounding a woman and hackling her, I'm sorry, you're not going to be the type that just keeps walking by. Now, there is that safety, because for that man to come up to those group of men to stop that is a very threatening situation. Now, I know men are tough, but they're risking very hard that levels of being attacked to being in that same thing.
I want you to.
It's doing something. I'm just saying everything. All of these things are doing something.
Those are extremes, right? Obviously, if I see something taking place like that, I'm obviously going to intervene, right? You know me. I'm not the person that's going to turn a blind eye. No. I'm going to hand you the phone, tell you to call the police, and I'm going to go fuck some shit up, right? You know that. That's not what I'm talking about. Yes, that is something that needs to happen, and more men need to step in and speak up and all of those kind of things. But that's an extreme.
I used an extreme.
Yeah.
But I didn't use all extremes.
I know, baby. So I'm trying to think of things in the middle. I'm trying to think of ways to, like, yes, I can raise our son differently, right? I can do things differently.
Don't say that like that. That is the fix.
I understand that that's the fix. But now how do I give that fix to all the other good men out there so that they see it? Because there's good men out there that don't realize that that's the fix. It's the education. Once you know better, then you do better. So how do we give that good man out there the realization of that's what he needs to do?
You should do a podcast.
I should do a fucking podcast that goes out all over the fucking world, right? So step one, that's why we're doing a fucking podcast about this shit in hopes of helping in some way, shape, or form. That's a good thing. I'm not satisfied with the bare minimum in regards to this topic or this big thing. I want to do something more. I want to feel like I've done something more because I owe it to you and our daughters and our future generations and our son, because it's important. So I want to do more than that. These are things that I've thought about. I thought about, because Stevie brings this to our attention, not a lot because it's not that big of a deal anymore, but the stupid asinine fucking dress code that exists at the school that she goes to.
Yes.
I thought about how asinine that dress code is.
Do you want to start some stuff with me?
I thought about that. And then I think, is that the direction that, because it's going to be multifaceted.
It's a start.
It is a start, but what does it do?
It teaches women that, okay, never mind. You're asking rhetorical questions.
Kind of, yeah. So these are things that I've thought about, right? That might be an avenue where we get the dress code changed for the school district that we live in.
I think it's a big.
Right? Because but this is the whole thing. That's a drop in the bucket. And I want to go down to the very bottom of the bucket. And at the very bottom of the bucket, we have to shift cultural perceptions surrounding men and women and sexuality and what's acceptable and what's not, and what's okay and what's not. And we have to make everything okay. Because the fact is, that is so fucking skewed and screwed up, right? So I was watching the second Matrix with Asher the other day, because we went on our Matrix kick. And so we're watching Matrix number 2 or whatever the fuck it's called. And there is some uncomfortable scenes in that movie, even though it's the fucking Matrix. But there is a scene where it's like the rave dance scene when they're in Zion and the drums are playing, and it's like a fucking snapshot of, I'm sure, what Burning Man looks like, and everybody's, ecstatic dancing and going crazy. And there's little flashes and shots of women in see-through tops, so you can see their breasts. And I remember, and then like in conjunction with that scene, there's also the scene where Trinity and Neo are having sex. And I remembered in the process of watching this with Asher, I'm like, oh, we've already watched this before. We've already seen this before. And I remembered that I had fast forward through that part with him before, whether that was like last year, 2 years ago or something like that I had watched this movie with him. And in that moment, I remembered fast forwarding through it in the past. And then this time, I didn't fast forward through it. We just sat there and watched it. Because I was like stuck in my head of like, he needs to understand that breasts are just breasts. It's not a big fucking deal if we just see a boob on TV, because it's just a breast. And lo and behold, women have breasts and have nipples, right? And he also needs to see, not necessarily see, but like, because when Trinity and Neo are having sex, it's not like obviously this big gratuitous sex scene or something like that. It's not pornographic. And I don't even think you see anything other than skin, but obviously you know that they're having sex. And so, like, it was this moment where I'm like, is this what I need to be doing? Like, do I need to normalize, that's the part that I got. So we just watched it. We didn't fucking fast forward through that scene, and it wasn't a big deal. It's not like he, in the past he's like, ooh, gross, and he'll like cover his face or something like that. That didn't take place. We just watched it and then continued watching the movie, and it wasn't a big deal. But it made me like question, like, what, because that's the problem, I think, that somehow I have to fast forward through a scene where the characters in the movie who love each other deeply are passionately making love, and people in Zion are ecstatically dancing with joy and happen to have their breasts out. All of which are 100% normal and fine and acceptable, and there's nothing wrong with it. So then I want my son to understand that and not feel like we can't look at breasts, or it's not okay to see those things, or that those things aren't okay to take place, or that somehow we have to fast forward through that scene. Or I remember going and watching rated R movies in the theater and my dad leaning over and covering my eyes, or being home and being told to cover my eyes during a sex scene.
Yeah. But it also goes to like, that's convoluted. There's not an answer for that.
That's the bottom of the bucket.
Well, no, it's not, because there's a part of seeing that and just having it be skin and be acceptable in what it is, to seeing it and saying, I have a right to see that. It's up to the person. So where you convolute and think that I can see your breast because I get to say it's not a big deal. It's that.
Yeah, everybody gets to decide what's acceptable for them and everything like that. And however, society as a whole has deemed women's breasts unacceptable to be seen, as opposed to a man that can walk around with his shirt off and there's no problem.
Agree. There is, I see where you're going with the separation of that. Like, it needs to be okay. However, it's also
not okay for everybody.
Well, it's not just not okay for everybody. That's not I'm trying to explain it, and I'm not doing a good job, to where, like, if a woman wants to have her breasts out, I think it's fine. I do. But if she doesn't, it's not fine for her to be said, like, to me, to feel like she has to, in a sense. Because then it turns where, like, oh no, it's my right to look at that. Or I'm going to look at your breasts and that's all I see. Like, there's a person attached. So you can't overly sexualize and just be like, that is a meat sack that I get to use for my pleasure.
Yes.
And that is all. Like, it's a person.
I totally agree.
So that's why I'm saying it's convoluted.
It is convoluted, because not only is it okay if a woman has her breasts out and it's just a person, but it's also okay if you're sexually aroused by the breast.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that.
But that's the problem, where I mean, it's not to say that that's the problem, but that's the convoluted space where some people, so like, there's plenty of examples over the course of time in history and recently in the past and whatever, where women are like empowering and they're not wearing bras and they're taking their breasts out and like, fuck you, it's just a breast, it's just a boob, blah, blah, blah. And then they
God forbid you feed a child with it.
And they want to be upset that somehow all men are looking at them in regards to sexual objects. What I'm saying is both of those things are okay, not to objectify women and, only boil them down to a sexual object, but at the same time, accept the fact that it is just a breast. It's just their body. It's not a big deal. Same thing with their vagina or with their ass or whatever the case may be, right?
It's a big deal. It's just not.
What I'm saying is it's both things, where it's okay for our son to understand and recognize that it's just a body part. It's not a big deal. It's not something that we all have to be so bizarre and weird and uncomfortable around. But at the same time, it's totally okay if you
like looking at it.
Yeah. And so how do you hold the space for those two things to take place? And then how do you hold the space for those two things to take place on the big grand fucking scheme of society where not everybody's going to agree, and there's some people that think that it's, you know, terrible, and like we have to be able to hold that space for those two things to exist from a very early age. And then I think you have the 14-year-old boy who understands that he sees an ass and it's okay. And at the same time, it's just an ass. Everybody sits down and shits on it. And then at the same time, like if the girl likes her ass to be slapped, that's okay. If she doesn't like it to be slapped, that's okay. All these kind of fucking things can take place. And then we don't have to have all of this uncomfortable, weird, bizarro, like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like I was watching porn with Asher. We were watching Matrix. It's not that big of a deal. Some people I'm sure would think it's a terrible deal. But it's like, how do we hold the space for, yeah, Mijo, that's just a boob. It's not a big deal. Everybody's got them. And at the same time, like, it's okay, Mijo, if that turns you on and you're aroused and you like looking at boobs. Like, that's totally fine. That's acceptable. And then how do you educate him so that he understands that it's acceptable, but then educate him in regards to what that...
It is a pleasurable thing, but it is not designed just for pleasure for a man.
Yes, but how does he healthily exhibit, express, feel, communicate, embody? How is that sexual arousal okay for him to exist in?
The only word I can think of is going to probably send you off on a tangent, because that is the question right there, like that answer. But I think it really does come down to consent. It comes down to, but how do you, I hope that answer comes. I hope you figure, that's it. That's what you can do. Go figure that shit out, please. Like,
yeah. I mean, consent is obviously a major component when it comes to the space of like sex and all those kind of different things. But it's not, I mean, that's important. And that's a topic that...
It's the only way I can think to describe it. I know it's not enough.
Well, but he...
like, this situation is so deep. Like, because
it's not just trying to educate our son on consent in regards to the time when... Because it's not just for sex. It's going to, at some point, he has to understand consent in regards to holding a girl's hand.
Yeah,
to
everything.
Kissing a girl, all these kind of different things. But also, how do we make it okay for him to just feel okay that he likes looking at boobs, separate from another actual person physically in front of him that he has to be then concerned about consent? And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
all of those things are totally okay and acceptable.
I don't know how to keep, I don't know.
I don't
like,
either.
I want it. I want him to be okay with his emotions, because like he's like, there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't know. I don't know how to, it's such a, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's because there's some bad things out there to look at, and that is still like the curiosity, because there's the curiosity of things that you see that are not healthy, and I do not want my children to see ever, especially when they're children. But things pop up, and then I don't know, it's that, you know, you're doing, I don't know if it's wrong, or like you have that feeling in your stomach that's like, ugh. So I don't know. I don't know how. I know I've tried to have conversations, and I think it does help also coming from women of like, oh God, where Stevie criticized for looking at a girl's butt at the swimming pool. And it was like, no, like, it's okay that you looked at her butt. It's okay that you liked her butt. It's okay that you're not allowed to do a double take. No, of course you're allowed to do a double take. To sit there and like oogle and come up and look them up and down and get in their space and, yeah, maybe you're fine here, and try and grab them. Like, yeah, that's a different thing.
But there's people that would look at that situation and say, no, it's not okay to take the double take. It's not okay to look at do you know what I mean? So we have to hold space for all of these different things.
I don't have
because
these
all of
answers.
these are okay.
They are.
You're okay to think that no, it's not okay. You're okay to think that it is okay. You're okay to, do you know what I mean? All of these things are totally 100% fucking okay. But then somehow we have to meet in the middle and come up with ways to move forward.
Oh.
And if we all just accept that it's all okay.
But it's not all okay. I don't have these answers.
I don't either, dear. That's why we're talking about it.
Don't get pissed off if I don't have them and don't agree.
I'm not pissed
you
off
don't even
at
know
you.
what you're saying.
I don't even know what I'm saying. And I have to pee.
I do too. But...
So let's wrap it up. Because this is a conversation
but
that...
there was so much more.
I know. We're going to continue the conversation.
I had things that I wanted... Okay,
Tell me.
fine.
No.
I can't remember now because you got on tangents. I had so many things. We got on tangents and took off, and I had important...
So for me personally, I've thought about what can I do. I'm going to be talking about this shit on the podcast a lot more.
Well, there you go.
Because that's something that I can do. I've thought about every time we have anybody come on, man or a woman, we talk about this. Even if that becomes the first question that we ask. What the fuck can you do about this shit? And then get everybody's take on it. So that the conversation is at least taking place in some form or fashion on the Energy is Love podcast. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
And then I got some other ideas.
I do too. You
know?
got to stop looking at the bottom of the bucket. It doesn't matter what's at the bottom of the bucket right now if you keep filling up the bucket. You got to turn off the faucet.
Yeah, I know. But you know
And
me,
then-
I like to go to the core of
Well, you go
things.
ahead and fix the pipe while it's still, maybe turn the water off first before you fix it so you can fix it. Keep duct taping around the wet pipe.
Do you think the penis monologues could happen?
I think
I think we'd have to call it something completely different. But could you see 30 men up on stage opening up and honestly sharing? And do you think that there would be value and benefit to it?
I can see it happening. I would support it. I would do whatever I could to make it happen. Now, doing it that way, the emotions, the shame, the same aspects,
The rawness and the real
the
to
rawness of the realness to it, and the fact of saying, coming from that place, yes. Now having, you look at it because here's the devil's advocate, if they're getting up there and, the women are there for our pleasure and doing that whole Pornhub show. I know, but that's so much of it with what it is that I would not.
Okay, but think about this, because there were parts during the Vagina Monologues where women were very, very much minimizing men and making men out as nothing but a dick.
It hurts,
And
huh?
then, I'm not saying
that suck?
I'm not saying it doesn't
God,
hurt.
what does that feel like for me?
I'm not
to
saying
have
that
to
doesn't
feel
hurt,
that
but I'm
for
saying
those
if
times?
if you're going to do the equivalent, and it doesn't have to be exactly the equivalent, but you have to hold space for all of it.
Well, guys have had that time. They have said that the whole time. Watch it. All the porn. Everything out there. It has been that they have had their points of saying that. Women haven't been allowed to have pleasure. Women haven't been allowed to do that. So you've got that voice. You've said that repeatedly.
Not me. I'm a good
Okay,
man.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I apologize for that. I totally
I'm not all men.
lumped all men into one man.
Yeah, and it's not me.
I already said I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But you know what? Men have used that. And now it's threatening that women want a little bit of pleasure and they put you in that same box. It's like, if you don't like that box, well, sorry, sucks to be you, huh? I don't mean that. Yes, I do. I do mean that. That's been said for a long time. You don't like it when it turns around and you get your own medicine. I'm sorry.
Nobody needs to get that. Everybody can come at it and be okay. I love you. I have to pee really bad. So I think we should wrap up because don't get off yet. We're going to talk some more. Hold
Yeah,
on.
says every man always. Ha.
You have to pee too. So listeners of this podcast, if you have thoughts about any of this shit, we would love to hear from you, because this is something that clearly isn't easily discussed or talked about, and input and advice, not even advice, but your thoughts would be amazing. And this is, Stephanie, please, this is something that we're going to continue to talk about, because I think that that is one way that we can do something about it, or I can do something about it, because that's pretty important to me. Why are you mad at me now?
I'm not mad at you. I'm just like, you said podcast was over. What I said was, so I'm waiting for you to be done.
Because we have to pee.
Yeah.
We can go pee and then come right back.
Oh, no. You go ahead and glare at me. I'm glaring back at you.
I love you.
I'm glaring at you with my vagina.
Vagina stare down. Okay.
I love you.
I love you. There's no way in hell we would ever get 30 men to get up on stage and talk openly about the struggles that they have experienced in regards to their sexuality, in regards to their penis.
There should be no fallout for saying no to anything. Men have had their voice and they chose how to use it.
So when you know better, you do better.
You can choose a different way. You can choose a different path. You can choose how you lead and how you treat people, regardless what they look like or what parts they have.